WNYC Studios.
Note to Self is supported by Mozilla, the nonprofit champion for a healthy internet and the maker of Firefox. Learn more about internet health at mozilla.org. Note to Self is supported by Squarespace, launching their new campaign, Make Your Next Move. Make your next move and set new goals this year. Lock down your next move idea with a unique domain and create a website to launch today. Use offer code NOTE for 10% off your first purchase of a Squarespace domain or website. Make your next move with Squarespace. More at squarespace.com. So it's almost like that game that I play when I go out to a restaurant with my husband and we watch people and we try to predict what we think their life really is.
Yeah, but just to pretend you and your husband were God and you already knew everything and your guesses were really good. If you think about what Facebook knows about that couple, they know a lot more, right? They know all their past. They know all their friends. They know which friends probably set them up. Facebook has a lot of information it's using to make these guesses.
It's Note to Self, the tech show about being human. I'm Manoush Zomorodi, and this is a special episode that we are doing with our friends at ProPublica. We are helping them launch a big and important project. They need your input to make it work, listeners. So I want to introduce you to Julia Angwin. She is the award-winning investigative journalist who tackles privacy issues at ProPublica. Her latest book was Dragnet Nation. Maybe you read it. Maybe you heard her on another show here at WNYC. In any case, though, she is a wonderful woman, and she is sitting here in the studio with me. Hi, Julia.
So great to be here.
Okay, so broad brushstrokes. Tell us what you and your team are up to now.
So we are investigating algorithms in our daily life, which sounds really wonky, but is really important. So most people's experience of the algorithm that shapes their lives is the Facebook news feed, which sort of sorts out your friends' posts, and you see the ones that Facebook thinks are most likely to resonate with you. But algorithms affect all parts of our lives.
So the reason why, just to be clear about why we call them black box algorithms, is because let's go back to the example we're going to use for the show, Facebook. They're not like, Julia, oh, you're doing another one of your projects. Here's one of our algorithms. And it's not because of proprietary reasons, because if they tell people what goes in the secret sauce, then they're out of business.
Yeah, most of these algorithms are trade secrets. The companies have intellectual property around them. They can defend them in court, and they are not going to release them because that's what makes their product better than their competitors. And so the only way to look at them is from the outside. That's why it's called like a black box. So you can see the inputs and you can see the outputs, but you can't see what magic is happening inside the black box. And so what we try to do is look at the inputs, look at the outputs, and say, okay, all we can say is it looks like weird stuff is coming out of here.
Yeah.
We can't say why. We can't say that you intended it that way. All we can say is we looked at the outcomes and it looked biased. When it's something as important as choosing what news you see or what friends you make or things like that that are really important to our democracy, they should be held to some sort of standard. That's the beauty of algorithms, is actually theoretically they could be more accountable. We could hold them to a higher standard. We could make the world a fairer place. That's why they're great. The problem is we're not holding them to those standards.
And so you and your team have come up with an experiment. Is experiment the right word to use?
Yeah, it's an experiment.
Okay. That you need people to take part in, right?
Yes.
And let's dive in. How does this work and what is it exactly?
So basically, this is just a tool that you can add to your web browser. So you just click Add Extension. If you've ever added an extension to your web browser. It's
any web browser? Does it need to be a certain browser?
It works with the Google Chrome web browser.
So you add the extension to your Chrome browser, and then what happens? What does it do?
What it does is it pulls up the page that's sort of buried in your Facebook settings that shows you what Facebook says it knows about you, which is your ad preferences page.
What would you learn when you go there?
Well, first of all, you learn that they know a lot about you. There are 3 types of categories they have. There's one that is just pages you liked. And so it says you have this interest because you liked a page like this. There's just basic demographics that are drawn from your profile. And then there's these inferred interests, which are not described that way, but they are clearly just based on some sort of synthesis of information about you. It says based on your behavior on Facebook. And so we don't really know what behavior led to it. So we've asked people to rate what Facebook says about them. So they can give it, actually, we've given it the Facebook emojis. So you can choose thumbs up.
When in Rome.
Yes, exactly. When we've been showing this to people, they get really mad about things that are wrong. And so I'm going to be interested to see what people respond to, because what I've noticed in general is these things tend to be either spookily accurate or spookily inaccurate.
And why do you think they get mad?
I think there's something about just being categorized wrong. It's like, you don't really love me. You don't even know me, you know?
That's so true. And yet, when they do nail it, that also makes you mad because you're like, wait a minute.
It's kind of like a bad relationship.
Yeah, either way.
You lose either way. They know you and you're mad. You're like, you creepy, invasive stalker.
Yeah.
And then they don't know you. You're like, where's the love?
Right. At the end of the day, are we talking about ad dollars? I mean, is that it? Like, that is the bottom line? This is all in the name of ad dollars?
For Facebook, yes, it's definitely all about ad dollars. You don't pay Facebook for the service they give you, and they make all their money by monetizing your behavior. And so they need to give advertisers the best possible view of you in order to lure them to their platform instead of Google or some other platform. And Facebook does probably have one of the best views of people because, as I mentioned, they have everything you ever did on Facebook. They have everything, a lot of things you do off Facebook. And then I didn't mention yet, but they do buy data broker information from people like Experian, Axiom, big data brokers that have offline files about you, your mortgage, what car you drive, property records. So they also buy data about you and add that to their file. So they have one of the most complete records of your online and offline life, probably of anyone that an advertiser could try to reach out to.
So from what you're saying, though, they really do potentially know their users better than their users know themselves? I mean, only Facebook can see the relationship that you've decided to get a 15-year mortgage and you also subscribe to The Nation. Like, they can connect dots in ways like you don't know what that means, but to them, they're like, aha, that means he's more likely to buy a Toyota next year or whatever, right?
Yep. That's right. But it's not everything. So the weird thing is, if you look at the list of what they offer advertisers, it says things like, you can advertise to people who just bought a car in the last week, and you can advertise to people with, this much property and mortgage and this much of, all these things. When you look at your Facebook page where they tell you what they know about you, it's nowhere near that granular. It's very basic, like, oh, you liked some pages about Susie and the Banshees and 10,000 Maniacs, and you
embarrassing.
Logged in from an iPhone, and then you had an Android, and then you went back to the iPhone, and then, but they have, if you dig through the menu, they do have a few categories that are basically the inferred data, which is where they've made a guess about you. So, for instance, one thing that we've been laughing about at ProPublica is that a lot of people in our office who are not African American are labeled by Facebook as having, quote, African American affinity, which I don't know what that means. So they have these rankings, which are kind of buried in their menus, that make some guesses about you. And they don't tell you how they made those guesses. And so what we have built is a tool that surfaces those guesses so that you don't have to dig through the menus, and you can use our tool to see what kind of things Facebook is saying about you. So one of my colleagues was given this inferred thing from Facebook that said he was interested in American Jewish culture, had a little picture of Joe Lieberman for some unknown reason, and he's
symbol of all things,
symbol of Judaism,
Jewish American,
I guess.
And is your colleague Jewish? I mean, not that it matters, but like, is he?
No, he's not actually.
Okay, so let's say somebody listening is like, and so what? Who cares that, like, he is interested, maybe he is interested in Jewish American. What does it matter?
Yeah, it might not matter. It's just that it does seem weird to be categorized that way, and you don't know how it's going to be used eventually.
And I have to say, like, I think a year ago, before Donald Trump was the Republican nominee, I might have poo-pooed this more, and yet this election has had so many uncomfortable racist overtones that you start to have a little bit of a peek into the dystopian future that doesn't seem as sci-fi as it might have been. Does that sound really pessimistic and horrible?
My children asked me if we were going to have to leave the country if Donald Trump won because they said, "Mommy, we're brown."
Wow.
And they are. My husband's Indian. And I was like, well, that's really disturbing that they're thinking that, right?
Incredibly disturbing.
Yeah. But I think that a better way to think about this that doesn't take us so far afield is just to look at the past, which is that data about people's religion in particular and lots of sensitive topics has almost always been abused. I mean, this is a truth. In Australia, they used census data to round up the Aboriginals, and in the U.S., we used it to round up Japanese into internment camps. So there's a lot of legacy of sensitive data being abused by governments. Well, will Facebook share this data with the government? Probably, if they're compelled to. I'm not saying it's being abused now, and it may not ever be, but what is interesting about it is that it's really sensitive data and there's no oversight. We don't know how they came up with this data, and we also don't know what they're going to do with it. And we're one of the only Western nations that doesn't have laws to oversee commercial data collectors. So most Western countries have some form of blanket privacy protections that basically say if a commercial data gatherer has information about you, they must show it to you. And they must allow you to correct it if it's wrong, and oftentimes give you an option to remove it. But I don't think there's really a prospect of regulation in this country right now. The Obama administration has actually several times tried to propose what they call a privacy bill of rights, but it has gone nowhere in Congress. So it doesn't seem like a real active threat of any legislation.
Is it hyperbole to say that Facebook is compiling the most complete consumer profile that has ever existed?
I think that is probably true.
This is fascinating. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back...
They know every time you've logged in, they know every device, so they actually know kind of where you live and work, probably, and your phone. And then they actually also know a lot about what you do off Facebook.
Note to Self is supported by SoFi. If you've worked hard to get the career you want, SoFi's here to offer easy savings on the student loans that helped you get there. SoFi refinances federal and private loans to save its members an average of $316 a month, so you can focus less on debt and more on the future. Learn more and find your savings at SoFi.com. Terms and conditions apply at SoFi.com/legal. Note to Self is supported by Mozilla, the technology nonprofit that believes every person should be in control of their own privacy on the internet. Mozilla uses and promotes plain language policies that give people straight talk about their online privacy rights. And Mozilla builds privacy into its own products. Their Firefox browser features a forget button and private browsing with tracking protection. And the new iOS browser, Firefox Focus, is set up for maximum privacy by default. For more, visit mozilla.org/privacy.
Hey, what's up? I'm Jessica Williams.
And I'm Phoebe Robinson.
And we are back this spring with an all-new season of our hit podcast, Two Dope Queens, from WNYC Studios.
It's comedy, it's conversation with your fave celebs. It's me and Jess telling trife stories about my bottle obsession.
Ugh, gross, dude. Why are you even bringing that up right now? Anyway, this season you'll hear from John Hamm, Carrie Brownstein, Tig Notaro, Gabrielle Union, and more.
Ooh, my pits are sweating just thinking about
Cool
it.
down, girl. Come on over to Two Dope Queens, wherever you get your podcast.
And Bono, call me.
We're back. I'm Manoush Zomorodi. This is Note to Self. And ProPublica's hotshot investigative reporter, Julia Angwin, is here with me.